All right, looks like we are ready to go. Let me just check the microphone. Microphone, yes. All right. And ready to go. Okay. We are going to start. Okay. We'll start by chanting Jaya Ra Kunya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Gopi Janaballabha Girivara Ahuti Gopi Janaballabha Girivara Ahuti Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhuva Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhuva Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Malabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhuva Kunya Bihari Jaya Radha Umadhava Kunya Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravatikacharya, also Teta Satashi Shrimad, His Divine Grace Savaya Chalananda Bhaktivedanta Goswami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrind Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Param Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shadvaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Gijaya Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopi Gopinath Shyam Kund Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Ki Jai Maturam Ki Jai Jagannath Swami Ki Jai Yamunamai Ki Jai Shrimati Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Putle Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharni Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Dejatarni. So Maganati Midandasya Gananjana Shalakya Chakshur Meditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances under the lotus feet of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who so kindly opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So let's chant this prayer by Srinivas Acharya from the Goswami Ashtaka before we read Nectar of Devotion. Nana Shastra Vicharanaika Nipano Sadharma Samstapako Lokanam Hitakarano Tribhuvanai Manyo Sharanya Karo Radha Krishna Padara Vinda Pashana Nandena Mataliko Vande Rupat Sanatano Rakuyago Sri Jiva Gopala Kaho. Okay, and the translation is, I offer my respectful obeisances unto the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, namely Shri Sanatan Goswami, Shri Rupa Goswami, Shri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Shri Raghunath Das Goswami, Shri Jiva Goswami, and Shri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who are very expert in scrutinizingly studying all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious honored all over the 3 worlds, and they are working in the mood of the gopis and are engaged in the transcendental loving service of Radha and Krishna. Okay, now we'll go on to the Nectar of Devotion. And we're going to a new section of the Nectar of Devotion, and this new section is dealing with the different rasas. And so, again, I'm going to explain what rasas are. The previous section was dealing with bhavas, emotions, vibhava, anubhava, sattvika bhava, sanshriya, vyabhachari bhava, and finally sthai bhava. And so this section is dealing with the 5 rasas and the 7 indirect rasas. Got it? Okay. So we're going to start now, of course, talking about neutral love of God, which is called Shanta Ras. Okay. So we are not neutral, but there is also neutral love of God. Here we go. Neutral love of God. One second. This is called Shantaras. Shanta, of course, means. For those of you who don't know what Shanta means, I'm sure those of you who are raised in Indian culture will understand what Shanta is. Shanta means peace. And usually after any particular ceremony, there's always this recitation of Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Let there be peace. So, Srila Rupa Goswami offers his respectful prayers to the eternal personality of Godhead, who is always so beautiful, and for whom the pure devotees are always engaged in loving transcendental service. This 3rd division of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu describes the 5 primary kinds of devotional service, namely neutrality, Shantaras, servitude, Dasharas, fraternity, Sakyaras, parenthood, Vatsalyaras, and conjugal love, Madhuryaras. These 5 items will be very elaborately explained here, and thus they've been figuratively described as the 5 waves on the western side of this ocean of the nectar of devotion. When one is actually able to maintain the transcendental position, his stage is called neutrality in devotional service. Some great sages have attained this neutral position by practicing austerity, penance, and meditation to control the senses. Such stages are generally called mystic yogis, and in most cases they're inclined to appreciate the spiritual pleasure of the impersonal feature of the Absolute Truth. They are practically unaware of the transcendental pleasure derived from personal contact with the Supreme Godhead. So, let me unpack this phrase here. Most cases, Prabhupada says here, they are inclined to appreciate the spiritual pleasure of the impersonal feature of the Absolute Truth. Now, we know the Absolute Truth has 3 features as far as this discussion is concerned. Of course, more features, but 3 general categories: Sat, Chit, and Ananda. Sat means the eternal aspect of the Lord, and that sat, and then chit means knowledge, basically knowledge of how Krishna is in everyone's heart, or knowledge of Krishna as a super soul, and then finally there's ananda. Ananda means bliss, happiness, ecstasy, whatever. So those are the three aspects. So those who only realize the impersonal feature of the absolute truth are situated only in the sat aspect of the absolute truth, the eternal aspect. They are also removed from the material world and material happiness and material distress. So why does Srila Prabhupada and therefore Rupa Goswami say in this particular sentence, they're inclined to appreciate the spiritual pleasure of the impersonal feature when the, let me just outline that for all of you. Whoops, my outlining is not, there we go. Inclined to appreciate the spiritual pleasure when in fact there's not pleasure simply in realizing that you're a spirit soul. And there is pleasure. All right, let me explain what that means. The pleasure that you get out of the impersonal feature of the absolute truth, or realizing that you're Brahman without a connection to Krishna, is the pleasure of relief. Just like if it's very hot or it's very cold, and you go inside and your house is air conditioned or heated, you feel. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives the example. They used to punish people. Also in America, they used to punish people in the same way. The methodology was that they would put someone on like a seesaw, like the children play on seesaws. So there would be a seesaw with the seat, one of the seats, over water. And what they would do is sit someone on that seat, and they would tie the person to the seat, and they would lower the person into the water for 3 or 4 minutes until practically the person was dead or couldn't breathe. Actually, couldn't breathe, but asphyxiated. So anyway, so they lower the person, and then after 3 or 4 minutes, they pull the person up, and the person would go, wow, ecstasy to breathe. So that ecstasy you do not experience right now. I mean, it's not that you're thinking, wow, ecstasy to breathe. But the ecstasy came because of the lack of the distress. So that's the pleasure that the impersonalists get. It's not actually a positive pleasure. It's a negation of the pain. Okay? There's transcendental pleasure derived from personal contact with the Supreme Godhead. Actually, so anyway, so another point about this is that in most cases, those who are in Shantaras are absorbed in the impersonal aspect. However, there's many in Shantaras who are aware of God and approach him in awe and reverence, and they also can experience some spiritual bliss. But their Shantaras is mixed at least to a little extent with service, if not the other rasas. Actually, the transcendental pleasure derived in association with the Supreme Person is far greater than the pleasure derived from impersonal Brahman realization because of the direct meeting with the eternal form of the Lord. Impersonalists do not directly derive the transcendental pleasure of association with the Lord by hearing of his pastimes. As such, the impersonalists cannot derive any relishable transcendental pleasure from the topics of Bhagavad Gita in which the Lord is personally talking with Arjuna. The basic principle of their impersonal attitude does not allow them the transcendental pleasure which is relished by a devotee whose basic principle of understanding is the Supreme Person. The impersonalist commentary on Bhagavad Gita is therefore disastrous, because without understanding the transcendental pleasure of the Gita, the impersonalist wants to interpret it in his own way. If an impersonalist can, however, come in contact with a pure devotee, his transcendental position can be changed for greater elevation. Great sages have therefore recommended to worship the form of the Lord in order to achieve that highest transcendental pleasure. In other words, the impersonalists even approach the Bhagavad Gita and take the indirect meanings of different verses. Where it is obvious, the direct meaning is what Krishna intends. For example, the famous verse, Manmana Bhavaman Bhakto, Madhyashi Namaskuru, Amagashasi Sachante Pratijane Priyosime. For Krishna has become my devotee, worship me, offer your obeisances unto me. And the impersonalists say, well, Krishna doesn't really mean it. He doesn't mean him, he means the impersonal, unborn, beginningless within himself, which is kind of stupid for them to think like that. Without understanding the Archa Vigraha form, or deity of the Lord, one cannot understand such literature as the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. It's also a very important statement that one should understand. The Archa Vigraha means that Krishna has a transcendental form. For those great sages situated in the position of transcendental neutrality, the beginning should be to take shelter of Lord Vishnu, the four-handed eternal form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The mystic yogis are therefore advised to meditate on the form of Lord Vishnu as recommended by Kapila Muni in the Sankhya Yoga system. Remember, we described the Sankhya Yoga system when we went through the Bhagavad Gita. Sankhya Yoga means to count. In other words, to analyze the different material elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, and intelligence, as false ego, the perceptive senses, the active senses, like that, the Pancha Mahabhuta. Actually, we already mentioned that. And gradually come to the position of understanding the soul and the super soul. Unfortunately, many mystic yogis try to meditate on something void. And as stated in the Gita, the result is that they simply undergo trouble and do not achieve any tangible result. That's in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. When some great saintly persons who had undergone penances and austerities saw the four-handed transcendental form of Vishnu, they remarked, this four-handed form of the Lord manifested in a bluish color is the reservoir of all pleasure in the center of our living force. Actually, when we see this eternal form of Vishnu, we are faded by the beauty of the Lord. This appreciation of Lord Vishnu by saintly persons is an instance of situation in Shantaras, or the neutral stage of devotional service. In the beginning, those who are aspiring for salvation try to get out of the material entanglement by performing painful austerities and penances, and ultimately they come to the impersonal status of spiritual realization. At this Brahmabhuta stage of liberation from material entanglement, the symptoms, as explained in Bhagavad Gita, are that one becomes joyous beyond any hankering and lamentation and gains a universal vision. When the devotee is situated in the Shantaras, or neutral stage of devotional service, he appreciates the Vishnu form of the Lord. Of course, the Bhagavad Gita verse that's being mentioned here is Brahmabhuta, Horasanatma Nashachati Nakanksati, Samaksarveshu Bhuteshu Bhaktim Abhate Param. That when one comes to the Brahman stage, he neither hankers nor laments for anything, and then he becomes fit to perform devotional service. Actually, all Vedic cultures aimed at understanding Lord Vishnu. And 1550 in the Gita verifies that. In the Rig Veda, one mantra says that any advanced saintly person is always aspiring to be fixed in meditation upon the lotus feet of Vishnu. And the verse is, Om Dad Vishnu Paramam Pada Pashanti Yat Suryahat, that all the saintly persons, they are looking to Vishnu. In Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said that the foolish do not know that Vishnu is the ultimate goal of life. Verses Nataya Vidhu Swartha Gatim Hi Vishnu Durashaya Yebahi Artha Manina Anda Yatanda Upatiyamanas Tepisha Tantram Udadamni Bara. The total verse is Nataya Vidhu Swartha. They don't know that the ultimate goal of life is to realize Vishnu. Durashaya Yebahi Artha. They are by it. They are thinking only of external things. Like acquisitions in the material world, external acquisitions. Andar yatandar. And they are blind, and they are following other blind people. And therefore they both fall into a ditch. According to the conclusion of all authoritative Vedic scriptures, when a person comes to the stage of appreciating Vishnu, he is at the beginning of devotional service. If one cultivates devotional service further and further, under proper guidance, other features of devotional service will gradually become manifest. At this stage of Shantaras, one can see Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the deliverer of even the demons. The Lord is appreciated by such would-be devotees as the eternal transcendental form, the chief of all self-realized souls, the super soul and the supreme Brahman. He is also appreciated as being completely peaceful, completely controlled, and pure, merciful to the devotees, and untouched by any material condition. This appreciation of Lord Vishnu in awe and veneration by the saintly is to be understood as the sign that they are situated in the Shantaras, or the neutral stage of devotional service. In other words, you just like appreciate the beauty of God. Wow, he is so beautiful, so attractive. I can't keep my eyes off of him. That's Archa Vigraha. This stage of Shantaras can be attained by the impersonalists only when they are in association with pure devotees. Otherwise, it is not possible. After Brahman realization, when a liberated soul comes in contact with a pure devotee of Lord Krishna and submissively accepts the teachings of Lord Krishna without misinterpretation, he becomes situated in this neutral stage of devotional service. The best example of saintly persons situated in the Shantaras are Sanaka, Sanatan, Sananda, and Sanat Kumar, the Kumara brothers. These four saintly persons, known as Chatushana, are sons of Lord Brahma. After their birth, when they were ordered by their father to become householders and increase human society, they refused the order. They said that they had already decided not to become entangled with family life. They would rather live as saintly brahmacharis for their own perfection. So these great saints have been living for millions of years now, but still they appear to be just like boys of 4 or 5 years. Their complexions are very fair. There's an effulgence in their bodies, and they always travel naked. These four saintly persons almost always remain together. Let me tell the story about them. So Lord Brahma, at the beginning of the creation, he had to fill up the universe with living entities. So he had several children who were Prajapatis. Prajapatis means those who were the fathers of other people. Prajapatis. Like if someone has a lot of children, we say he's a Prajapati. Of course, Krishna says, Aham Bija. And of course, he functions in that way in the material world through Lord Shiva. So anyway, Lord Brahma had this dilemma. You got to fill up the universe. The whole purpose of the universe is to give a chance for the conditioned souls to go back to Godhead. So we got to arrange for different bodies and births and parents and grandparents and great-grandparents. Woo! And so most of his kids cooperated with him in that particular endeavor. Just like when someone has children, they're generally thinking, children will make me happy by having children of their own, and then I can enjoy grandchildren. Because that is illusion. Because then you remain together in this material world forever. So anyway, he asked these four little boys, the Kumaras, after he gave birth to them, you should get married. That's a standard way to have children. Of course, for some really high entities, they don't need to get married to have children. We're not talking about illicit sex or wedlock or anything like that here. They can Lord Brahma can create entities from his mind, from his chest. He doesn't need his wife in that particular regard. So anyway, just like the scientists now, they're trying to create life in the laboratory. Of course, they won't be able to do that. So Lord Brahma said to his four little boys, they're 5 years old, but he was still planning. to get him married. You have to start early when someone's going to be a Prajapati. So he said, boys, I eventually want to get you married. And they said to their father, no way, Dad. We're not getting married, No getting entangled in this world for us. We want to be preachers. Of course, at that time, they weren't Krishna conscious, but, we want to be detached. We don't want to get entangled. So Lord Brahma got really angry, and then basically he gave birth to 11 Rudras at that point from his forehead, because Lord Brahma is a powerful living entity. He can give birth from his mind, he can give birth from in so many different ways. And so these 11 Rudras came out, a manifestation of his anger, and they were threatening to destroy the whole universe. So basically he just got all them married, so they had to cool down a little bit. And actually, you see sometimes that when we get people married, they cool down a little bit, or they become responsible. Prabhupada remarked when he was running his business, his pharmaceutical business, that he would never hire someone unless they were married, because they'd be much more responsible, because they had responsibilities. If they weren't married, they were footloose and fancy-free, and you couldn't depend on them. It's a fact. I mean, better to depend on married people. Or sannyasis, they're good too. So anyway. So these are the four brothers, and eventually these four brothers came across Lord Vishnu. How did they come across Lord Vishnu? One day they decided to go on a little trip to the spiritual world, because they were very powerful. They could go to the spiritual world. But they couldn't really enter because they were just impersonalists at that time. So they went to the boundary of the spiritual world, and they were stopped from going in by these two personalities named Jai and Vijay. And they got very angry. The four Kumars got very angry at Jai and Vijay and said, you're acting like demons. And Lord Vishnu had to come. They were getting ready to curse. And they did curse. You should become demons. And so Lord Vishnu came to the scene, and the four Kumars were able to smell the tulsi leaves and flowers offered to the lotus feet of the Lord. And they became devotees at that time. So all's well that ends well. Except the two people who kept the Kumars from entering into the spiritual realm, Jai and Vijay, had to take birth as demons. But that's okay. That was the Lord's plan, because the Lord wanted devotees to fight with in the material world, and they took birth as Haranyaksha, Haranyakashipu, Ravana, Kumbhakarna, Shishupala, and Dantavakra, and eventually Jagai Mata. In one of the prayers of the Kumara brothers, this declaration is made. O Lord Mukunda, Krishna, the giver of liberation. Also Mukunda means Krishna has a beautiful face like a lotus flower. Only so long as one does not happen to see your eternal form of bliss and knowledge appearing just like a newly grown tamal tree with a bluish hue, only for so long can the impersonal feature of the absolute truth, known as Brahman, be very pleasing to the saintly persons. And in other words, they gave up their attraction to Brahman when they saw Krishna. And of course, there's a famous verse in the Bhagavatam called the Atmaraman's verse, Amanamscha Muniya Nigranta Piya Rukame Kurvanti Ahaitaki Bhakti Utamukta Gunahari. That the proof that Krishna's activities, the Krishna consciousness is transcendental, that even those who are absorbed in Brahman are attracted to it. In other words, even those who have no material attraction are still attracted to Krishna's activities, pastimes, and form. That proves that Krishna's activities of this material world is those who take pleasure or are satisfied in the self. The qualifications of a saintly person are described in the Bhakti Rasam Rita Sindhu as follows. A saintly person is one who understands fully that simply by discharging devotional service, he can become competent of liberation. He is always situated in the regulated principles of devotional life, and at the same time aspires to be liberated from material entanglement. A saintly person thinks like this, of course, that's not the highest stage. The highest stage is one is fixed in Krishna consciousness, but simply wants to please Krishna. And it's not thinking, will I become liberated? Will I not become liberated? Will I take another birth? What is my next birth? He or she is simply thinking, whatever happens, I just want to please Krishna. Mama Janmani Jananishvare Bhavatad Bhakti Ahai Pitwe, as Lord Chaitanya states. The saintly person thinks like this: when shall I be able to live alone in the caves of the mountains? Sounds pretty good, as long as they had internet there. When shall I be dressed simply with undergarments? Doesn't sound good in North Carolina. When shall I be satisfied by eating simply a little fruit and vegetables? Sounds good. When will it be possible for me to think always of the lotus feet of Mukunda? Good. Who is the source of the Brahman effulgence? I can't relate to that. When in such a spiritual condition of life shall I fully understand my days and nights to be insignificant moments in eternal time? So you see, there's still like a rejection of the material world, almost sort of like a ghastliness towards the material world. It's a horrible place. But a pure devotee is not thinking like that. A pure devotee is thinking, this material world is a place meant to serve Krishna, like everywhere else I go. The devotees and self-realized persons who are engaged in preaching the glories of the Lord always maintain an ecstatic love for the Lord within their hearts. Thus, they are benefited by the rays of the ecstatic moon, and they are called saintly persons. The impulse of a saintly person is to be engaged in the study of the Vedas, especially the Upasanic portions, to live always in a place where there is no disturbance from the common people, to think always of the eternal form of Krishna, to be ready to consider and understand the absolute truth, to be always prominent in exhibiting knowledge, to see the Supreme Lord in his universal form, Vishvarupa, to associate always with learned devotees, and to discuss the conclusion of the Vedas with similarly elevated persons. All these qualifications of a saintly person serve to raise him to the status of Shanta Ras. Now, those who are situated higher, they're not specifically thinking like this. The impulse of a person who is more transcendental is to always be engaged, in addition to studying the Vedas, but only the portions of the Vedas that glorify Krishna. And there are some Upanishads like that, like the Gopal Tapani Upanishad. And to live where there's disturbance from common people so they can preach to them. They always desire to think of the eternal form of Krishna, and they don't really desire to be prominent in exhibiting knowledge. And they don't desire to see the universal form of the Lord. Like I mentioned when we went over the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, I'm not really interested in reading about the universal form of the Lord. Of course, reading the 11th chapter is nice, but I don't want to think about the universal form. To associate always with learned devotees, yes, I'd like to do that. And discuss the conclusion of the Vedas with similarly elevated persons, that's fine. So you see, some of these qualifications don't fit a devotee who's in a higher status, and some of them do. In the Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu, it is stated that all those who attended the pious meeting held by Lord Brahma for the study of Vedic literature like the Upanishads became overwhelmed with ecstatic love for Krishna, the chief of the Yadu dynasty. Actually, the result of studying the Upanishads is to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Negation of material existence is only one of the subjects of the Upanishads. The next subject concerns becoming situated in the impersonal realization, and then after penetrating through the impersonal Brahman, when one comes to the platform of associating with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one reaches the ultimate goal of studying the Upanishads. So the word Upanishad means to come closer to the spiritual mastery, to understand the absolute truth from the spiritual master. So the Upanishads do deal with Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana, the nature of this world and the relationship with the Lord and his energies. That's Sambandha, Abhideya, the practice of devotional service, a little bit of Prayojana. But basically, it's mostly Sambandha, and you have the Vedanta Sutra, or sutras, which are commentaries on the Upanishads, and then you have the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, and also there's other commentaries by our different acharyas. Those who were situated on the meditation. To hear Krishna. How about now? Can everyone see me now? Can you hear now? Okay. I had to switch. The internet went out here, and I'm on my phone right now. Okay, sorry for that. It ain't my fault. It's the fault of Spectrum, our internet provider. Okay, so we'll continue. Let me go back to the screen sharing. Sorry for the delay. Okay, so we'll go back to screen sharing. So let's see. Okay, let me just continue. Not just continue, but let me go back a little bit. Uh, so Shantaras, they become ecstatic by going to a place of pilgrimage, visiting the course of the Ganges River, by being victorious over the dictations of bodily demands, eating, sleeping, mating, defending, by understanding the devastation of eternal time, and by constantly associating with devotees engaged in Krishna consciousness. All these different actions or items are favorable in elevating the saintly persons situated in Shantaras to the advanced stage of devotional service. In the third canto, 15th chapter, verse 43, the Srimad Bhagavatam, There's a statement by the four saintly persons known as Chatusara, headed by Sanatana Kumar. They went to visit the Lord of Vaikuntha Loka in the spiritual sky, and when they bowed down before the Lord, the aroma of the tulasi mixed with saffron entered their nostrils and immediately attracted their minds. Although these four saintly persons were always absorbed in the thought of impersonal Brahman, from the association with the Lord and from smelling the tulsi leaves, the hairs on their bodies immediately stood up. This shows that even a person who is situated in Brahman realization, if he is put into association with devotees in pure devotional service, will immediately become attracted to the personal feature of the Lord. And that's the story I mentioned before, how the four Kumaras went to the gate of Vaikuntha, the spiritual world, and they smelled the tulsi leaves and flowers offered to the lotus feet of the Lord, and they became ecstatic, became devotees. There are certain symptoms of great sages who are situated in Shantaras devotional service. And these symptoms are as follows. They concentrate their eyesight on the tip of the nose, and they behave just like an avadhuta. Let me explain what that means. Why do they concentrate their eyesight on the tip of their nose? Because, not because the nose is so attractive, because if you concentrate, I mean, you close your eyes half, and you're not seeing Maya of this world, nobody gets attracted by the tip of the nose. And you're not closing your eyes completely. In that case, you would go to sleep. So in other words, it's like you stay awake, you're looking at something, but you ain't getting attracted. Most people are not attracted to the tip of their nose. I'm not attracted. And they behave like an avadhuta. An avadhuta, Prabhupada explains what that means. It means a highly elevated mystic who does not care for any social, religious, or Vedic conventions. You know, they dress like a slob, or don't dress at all, or act stupid so people won't bother them. Another symptom is that such persons are very careful to step forward when giving speeches. When they speak, they join together the forefinger and thumb. This is called the Jnana Mudra, like this. They are not against the atheist, nor are they particularly inclined to the devotees. Such persons give stress to liberation and detachment from the materialistic way of life. They're always neutral and have no affection for nor misidentification with anything material. They're always grave, but fully absorbed in thoughts of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. These uncommon features develop in devotees who are situated in Shantaras. Regarding concentration of the eyesight on the tip of the nose, there's a statement in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu by a devotee who observed this being performed by a yogi. He remarked, this great sage is concentrating his eyesight on the tip of his nose, and from this it appears that he has already realized the eternal form of the Lord within himself. A very liberal devotee. Sometimes a devotee in Shantaras yawns, stretches his limbs, instructs on devotional service, offers respectful obeisances unto the form of the Lord, offers nice prayers to the Lord, and has a desire to give direct service with his body. These are some of the common symptoms of the devotee who is situated in neutrality. One devotee, after observing the yawning of another devotee, addressed him thus, my dear mystic, I think that within your heart there is some ecstatic devotional love which is causing you to yawn. It is sometimes found that a devotee in the Shanta Ras falls down on the ground, his hairs stand up on his body, and he trembles all over. In this way, different symptoms of ecstatic trance are exhibited automatically by such devotees. So even a devotee in Shanta Ras can experience something. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it is said that when Lord Krishna was blowing his conch shell, known as the Panchajanya, many great sages who were living in the caves of mountains immediately reacted. Being awakened from their trance of meditation, they immediately saw that the hairs of their bodies were standing. Sometimes devotees in Shantaras become stunned, peaceful, jubilant, deliberate, reflective, anxious, dexterous, and argumentative. These symptoms indicate continuous ecstasy or established emotion. Here we're talking about also Sattviga Bhava, and sometimes Vyabhachari Bhava, and sometimes Anubhava. So even when it's Shantaras, if they're devotees. So Prabhupada is sometimes skipping from those who are simply Shanta without being devotees, in realizing personalism, personal aspect of the Lord, and skipping to those who are actually devotees. who have some appreciation of the Lord. Once a great self-realized sage was lamenting that the Supreme Lord Krishna was living in Dwarka, but he was unable to take advantage of seeing him. After thinking this, the sage immediately became stunned. He was thinking that he was simply wasting his time. In other words, the sage lamented because the Supreme Personality of Godhead was personally present, but still he could not take advantage of this because of his meditation. He's thinking, what's the use of my meditation? This morning in class, we're actually talking about how basically everything other than serving Krishna is a waste of time. And the Bhagavatam is so explicit about this. What does it say? What is the use of a long life like the trees that live for thousands of years? What is the use of life like the beasts that eat and sleep and discharge semen? What is the use? Because it has no ultimate advantage. Of course, the main advantage is, the main advantage is simply getting kicked life after life, and eventually you're going to surrender to Krishna. So, you say there's a purpose to it. But really, whatever you do in this life is taken away. Whatever you acquire in this life is taken away. Your family, your friends, your money, your buildings, your fame. And next life, you just may become a mouse in the same building that you built or you're attached to. Prabhupada said that a man builds a skyscraper, and he's very attached to it. He become a mouse in the skyscraper and take birth. And actually, we saw one interesting thing. One time, I was visiting. Let's see where we are. I was actually visiting the ISKCON farm community. And when I was visiting the ISKCON farm community, there was something very interesting that was happening. There was a dog there. What's so interesting about a dog? I've seen plenty of dogs. Well, what was interesting is that every morning at about 7 o'clock in the morning, this dog would go on a route and look at all the animals on the farm, the whole perimeter of the farm, like go several hours. Why is a stupid dog going to do that? Because in his last life, he was the owner of the farm. And every morning in his last life, he used to take a tour of the farm to make sure everything was all right, to make sure the fences were in good condition. So now he is also there on his farm as a dog, just checking things out. And many times we have seen in the Krishna conscious movement, there's a dog or cat or something, that is at the temple, and the cat or dog just stares at the window at the temple room, looking at the deities, wanting to come in. Why did I take birth as a dog or a cat? I was too attached to my last life. Oh no. Or maybe I committed offenses in my last life, and I'm just being taken away, and I'm just lamenting. So that happens. When a mystic is transcendental to all kinds of mental concoctions and is situated in Brahman, his state is called trance and beyond the influence of the material conception of life. In that state, when one hears about the transcendental pastimes of the Lord, there may be shivering of the body. When a Brahman realized devotee who has come to the stage of steady trance comes into contact with the eternal form of Krishna, his transcendental pleasure increases millions of times. One great sage once inquired from another, "My dear friend, do you think that after I perfect the eightfold yoga performance, I shall be able to see the eternal form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead?" This inquiry from the sage is an instance of inquisitiveness in a devotee situated in the neutral stage of devotional service. When Lord Krishna, along with his elder brother Balaram, and sister Subhadra came to Kurukshetra in a chariot on the occasion of the solar eclipse. Many mystic yogis also came. When these mystic yogis saw Lord Krishna and Balaram, they exclaimed that now they had seen the excellent bodily effulgence of the Lord. They had almost forgotten the pleasure derived from impersonal Brahman realization. In this connection, one of the mystics approached Krishna and said, "My dear Lord, you're always full with transcendental bliss, excelling in all other spiritual positions. And so simply by seeing you from a distant place, I have come to the conclusion there is no need of my being situated in the transcendental bliss of impersonal Brahman. Let me just see how much we have left in this chapter. Hold on a second. All right. Let's see if we can finish the chapter. Not real. Wait, yeah, make it down. Whoops. It's a long chapter. I don't think we can finish it. Yeah, we can. Actually, it's just one more page. Sorry about that. When a great mystic was once awakened from his meditative trance by hearing the vibration of Krishna's Panchajanya conch shell, the mystic became overpowered, so much in fact that he began to bash his head on the ground, and with his eyes full of tears of ecstatic love, he violated all the rules and regulations of his yoga performances. Thus he had once neglected the process of Brahman realization. Bilvamangal Thakur, in his book Krishna Karnamrita, says, let the impersonalist be engaged in the process of transcendental realization by worshipping the impersonal Brahman. Although I was also initiated into that path of Brahman realization, I have now become misled by a naughty boy, one who is very cunning, who is very much attached to the gopis and who has made me his maidservant. So I have now forgotten the process of Brahman realization. Bilvamangal Thakur was first spiritually initiated for impersonal realization of the absolute truth, but later on by his association with Krishna and Vrindavan. And I told the story about that, how he took his eyes out. He became an experienced devotee. The same thing happened to Shukadeva Goswami, also to his story, who also reformed himself by the grace of the Lord, took the path of devotional service, giving up the way of impersonal realization. Shukadeva Goswami and Bilvamangal Thakur, who gave up the impersonal conception of the absolute truth to take to devotional service, are the best examples of devotees situated in the neutral state. According to some authorities, this condition cannot be accepted as one of the transcendental humors or rasas. But Srila Rupa Goswami says that even if one does not accept it as a transcendental humor or ras, one must still accept it as the beginning position of devotional service. However, if one is not further raised to the platform of actual service of the Lord, he is not considered to be on the platform of transcendental mellow. In this connection, in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Krishna established in my personal form is called Shantaras, and without being situated in this position, no one can advance to actual pure devotional service. In other words, no one can be situated in the personal feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead without being situated, at least in Shantaras. And I'll explain that. I mean, Shantaras is like a prerequisite. Shantaras means being detached from the material world, absorbed in the spiritual, because you can't be a pure devotee if you're attached to this material world. But pure Shantaras by itself is not pure devotional service. Must have a mixture of some servitude, at least. Okay. And on that note, we will end the chapter 35, and we will take some questions from you all, if that is all right. All right, let me take you all off of mute. And just 1 second. You are now technically allowed to unmute yourselves. So who has a question? Whoops. Question.
Hare Krishna, Gurudev. Please accept my humble obeisances. Hare Krishna.
Can't hear you. Wait a second. It's strange. Let me just check this. Oh, I see. Unmute speaker. Whoops. Okay. Try again.
Hare Krishna, Gurudev. Please accept my humble obeisances.
Wait a second. There's trouble hearing you. Just 1 second. Let me. Samsung. Try again.
Hare Krishna Gurudev, please accept my humble
Whoops.
obeisances.
I hear you now.
Please accept my humble obeisances, Gurudev.
Haribol.
Haribol, this is my fourth humble obeisances, Prabhu Gurudev.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Gurudev, just very quickly, you mentioned association of pure devotees. I have a question about us having association with pure devotees. We are attending the classes and having association with you through Zoom. Is this the best pure devotee association we can have?
No,
Is
you
this
have Prabhupada's books also. Like Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, he who reasons ill says that Vaishnavas die when thou art still living in sound. So you can hear from all these great devotees, Prabhupada and other devotees in disciplic succession. And that way you're associated with pure devotees. And obviously, when we're reading Srila Prabhupada's books, we're associating directly with His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. So you have plenty of association with pure devotees.
Thank you, Gurudev. Thank you.
Okay? Don't worry.
Just another quick question. Sorry, about
Yeah.
detachment. About detachment to have the to advance. Now we are working as in our professional life, and we are also doing devotional services. We are trying to engage in pure devotee. But question is, how do we? And we still like our profession. We still like going to work. Now detachment and liking something. Where's the line? Like, how would we make sure that we are not attached?
Well, liking your work is actually a good idea. I mean, Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita liked his work. There's nothing wrong with liking your work, but the result should be given to Krishna. So liking your work is fine, but the result should be given to Krishna, and you should be thinking while you're doing your work that you're doing it for Krishna. Everyone should like their work that they do. It's a disaster. I mean, if someone's doing some job that they hate, that is really bad to live your whole life like that. So we should like what we are doing. Very good. So it's good. Yeah, like what you're doing, like your family. That's fine to like your family, like the devotees. Just do everything for the pleasure of Krishna. Just think while you're working, I'm doing this for Krishna's pleasure. Everybody has a different nature. We all like different types of work. So don't worry. Be happy.
Thank you.
Okay. Who else has a question? Question, comments? Everyone should like what they do. I like what I do.
You love what you do, Gurudev.
Yeah, I'm happy. I like what I do. I wouldn't exchange it for anything. The only wish I have is to be able to travel again so I can see all of you in person. I mean, as soon as there's a flight out of here to Australia, New Zealand, Europe, I'm on it, the first flight. Even if there's not a flight, even if there's not a flight, I'll get on a cruise ship and work as a cruise director. Just to...
You're so blessed. You're so blessed.
Anyway, right now, I mean, it looks like pretty soon we're all going to be able to travel. It just depends on the vaccine. I would say within the next 2 or 3 months that traveling is going to be all right. Why does Jagat has a question here. Why does someone in Shantaras step forward when he speaks? Because he has courage because he doesn't care what people think. It's just like, and he wants to save people. He's actually also wants to bring people to Shantaras too. So I would say that everybody, all the rasas, they would step forward when they're preaching Krishna consciousness. I think that's a common denominator of all the different rasas. So, Jagat, is your internet out too, Jagat? Looks like it because I can't see you. Anyway. So, or else, who else has a question? Oh, anyway, my internet may be back on. I'm just on my phone right now. Anybody else have a question? No.
Hare Krishna.
Nobody. Oh, Arjuna.
Can I ask a philosophical question?
Yeah, as long as it's not about atheism. What's I'm just
Well, I'm wondering, I'm not really sure based on our Siddhanta whether it would be accurate to say that Krishna has foreknowledge of what choices we're going to make, or whether that's because the future doesn't exist yet, so it's not something that Krishna needs to know about to be all-knowing.
Krishna knows everything past, present, and future.
Including every little choice we make.
No, we still have a choice. First of all, Krishna may decide not to have knowledge. That's his decision. He may be thinking, I'm not going to think about it. But ultimately, if he didn't have knowledge of which way we would choose, because choosing, or our ability to choose, doesn't negate Krishna's omniscience, nor does Krishna's omniscience negate our ability to choose. It just means that Krishna. I agree. It's like people think it's a contradiction. I always get this question that people think it's a contradiction, but we're choosing. It's just Krishna knows which way we're going to choose. That's all. And we could have chosen something else, and Krishna would have known that we were going to choose something else.
Yeah.
It's not that Krishna, predestination means Krishna is forcing things to happen. So we are choosing, and we're always in the present anyway. But Krishna knows everything, past, present, and future. If I say that God doesn't know the future, doesn't know which way I'm going to choose, then I'm limiting God. Of course, Krishna could also, because he's unlimited, give us the choice of choosing in a way different than he thought we were going to choose. How about that answer? What do you think about that answer? That's interesting.
I'm not sure if I fully got it.
Because Krishna is all-powerful. He can do anything he wants. He can let us choose in a way different than what he thought we were going to choose.
Right.
Try to digest that one.
But wouldn't he have known that we were going to choose different than he thought we were going to choose?
No, not. I mean, yeah. I guess you can take another step back like that. He would have known. But then Krishna can change his knowledge. Krishna could change. He would have known, but then Krishna has a desire. Krishna can change. In other words, Krishna can change the future. Krishna, because of Yoga Maya, Krishna can decide to change the future. Krishna could think, let's take America, which is on my mind. Krishna could think the future is that Donald Trump is going to actually cause a revolution and become a fascist leader of the United States. And then I could pray to Krishna and say, Krishna, don't let it happen. And Krishna can change it. And I'm definitely praying to Krishna about that. So anyway.
So would we say Krishna is compartmentalized as an aspect of him that knows everything, and then there's the Yoga Maya covered aspects?
Yeah. Then there's the Yoga Maya covered aspect. Krishna can choose to know everything, and also Krishna could choose not to know everything. If Krishna didn't have that free will or independence, then he wouldn't be God. So Krishna can choose to know everything. Krishna can choose not to know everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, we ask these questions sometimes, like, can Krishna create a mountain, an immovable object, and move the immovable object? That's a contradiction, actually.
Can he make a burrito so hot that he can't eat it?
Yeah. I mean, Krishna is an amazing chap. We were reading this morning in Bhagavatam that when it's really hot in Vrindavan, Krishna gets hot. But Krishna has a spiritual body. How the heck is he going to get hot? And then he allows the clouds to rain down to cool him and the coward boys. So, it's kind of cool. Krishna's kind of cool. You can't figure him out. The problem is when we try to figure Krishna out. He's beyond logic because Krishna transcends the rules of logic. Krishna wrote the rules of logic. So that's why you can't, ultimately, logic doesn't prove a damn thing as far as the absolute truth is concerned. We can use it in the service of Krishna, but it really doesn't prove anything because he's beyond the rules of cause and effect. Sarva karana karanam. He's the cause of all causes. So if you use logic, which is basically based on cause and effect, and it doesn't work with Krishna. So again, we have to take shelter of the word achintya. So don't worry. Don't worry. Krishna will leave it up to you whether you go back to Godhead or not. That's up to us, not up to Krishna. Actually, I was just reading something amazing that when even people in Maya get the dust of the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani, then all their illusion goes away. Wow. Okay, on that happy note, because I don't want to use up any more of my phone internet, we'll see everybody tomorrow at the same time, same station. Actually, we have something very special coming up on Saturday here, which will be Sunday morning your time. Or Sunday. Yeah, Saturday. Well, actually, it'll be, Sunday morning. Not really, Sunday, very early morning. Your time in New Zealand, Fiji, and Australia. We're having a very special Diwali dance of the Lita Madhava. Anyway, we'll be broadcasting it again, probably at this time on Sunday morning for all of you, sorry. Sunday morning for all of you. The Champakalata is displaying the whole Lalita Madhava with her troupe of dancers, expert dancers. Lalita Madhava is the play by Srila Rupa Goswami depicting the love of the gopis for Krishna and the gopis expanding as the queens in Vrindavan, and especially Satyabhama, who is the expansion of Srimati Radharani in Dwarka, Queens and Dwarka, sorry. So anyway, it's a very special, ecstatic play, and you're all invited to see it. And we will be putting it up on the internet. I'm not sure if I'll do it. Yeah, I will put it on Zoom. Okay, all glorious to His divine grace.